Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What's the scariest or weirdest supernatural thing you've ever encountered? Not safe for work. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. About 20 years ago, while living in the first home I owned, I was sitting and watching TV late at night. My youngest son, about 3 or 4 at the time, came out of his room and said, "Dad, come see the lady in my room." I said, "What?" And he said, "There's an old lady in my room." I was a little freaked out, as I always felt something strange in the house. I went with him to his room, and there was nothing there. My son said, "She's gone now." I asked him where he saw her, and he said, "She comes out of the wall." I was about 10, I think, and got woken up around 2 a.m. by what sounded like a man breathing loudly from somewhere in my bedroom. After being frozen in fear, I ran out and all the way to my parents' room, where I woke my dad up. He was confused and disoriented, but agreed to come see back there with me. We got there and sat on my bed for about a minute and listened. It seemed like it was gone, and I was just about to convince myself that it was a dream or an artifact of partial wakefulness, but then the breathing returned. I stared at my dad and watched his face, and it was very clear it was not his breathing, and he was definitely hearing it too. After the moment of surprise, he started searching my room. By the time he had looked everywhere, it stopped. Concerned, he then searched the rest of the house, and even walked around the outside with a flashlight, checking out the area near my window especially. It was not a windy night, and my room never had any noises from drafts ever. We never found out what the breathing was, and both still remember it. It never happened again. The thing that creeps me out the most now is that there was only one place we didn't think to check, and that was the attic, which connected to my room through a sealed hatch in the ceiling. But maybe that was thin enough to hear something through. My living room has a huge mirror which reflects the passage doorway. I was around 11 or 12 years old when I was looking into it and brushing my hair for school. I was just about to tie it up when I saw a white figure walk past my door. I knew it was my grandmother and that she is just showing us that she's still present, but my God, did it scare the F out of me. I posted this a few years back, and since I'm a lazy ass, I'ma just copy and paste my previous post, so here goes. Crazy demon tree story repost. Let me preface this by saying I'm one of the most skeptical people you'll ever meet. I'm not religious, I don't believe in ghosts or aliens in the come-to-earth abductions, etc. sense. There's probably a good chance there's life out there somewhere in the vastness of space or any of that. This is the weirdest thing I've ever encountered, and I have no real logical explanation for it. No drugs or booze were involved. My friends and I went camping up in the White Mountains of New Hampshire most summers in the middle and high school, and a few years after, till life happened and we all went our ways. Now, being a bunch of unorganized teen boys or man-children, we always took forever to get in gear and actually get going, usually not leaving southern Mass, where we lived, until late afternoon, early evening. One year, we got up there about 10 p.m. or so, and decided rather than hike into the woods, we'd just sort of camp or crash out in the parking lot and hike in the AM. After a bit of unwinding and some food, everyone went to bed except for me and one other dude. We ended up wandering over to a small wooden footbridge on a river. It was a perfectly clear night, filled with stars and a fairly bright moon, and we were shooting the breeze for a good couple of hours about all sorts of stuff, movies, games, life, etc., etc. Had to be well after midnight by this point. As we were chatting, we both got this creepy feeling of something being there, and it was sinister. Looking at the far end of the bridge, there was this massive dead tree. No leaves, just clawing branches, silhouetted against the sky. We both were like, "Man, I swear that tree is creeping me out. But that's silly, right?" At first, we tried to dismiss it as silly, but both of us kept feeling more and more unnerved until I finally was like, "Screw this, I'm a grown man. I'm not afraid of a damn tree. I'ma walk over there." I get like 2/3 of the way across the bridge, and it feels like something reached in and grabbed my pounding heart. Just went totally ice cold. I backed up and was like, "Yeah, I'm afraid of a tree. I seriously think I'm not coming back if I go over there." We retreated from the bridge and decided to go back in the sleeping bags by the car. Next morning after breakfast, we decided to hike into the trail by going across that bridge. Halfway across, my friend freezes. Dude, I look across the bridge. It's a clearing. There's no trees there. So the building where I interned at had 5 floors, and the office I worked was on the 5th floor, so I took the elevator to come and go. One day when I was leaving, a UPS guy had just dropped off a package on my floor and had gone into the elevator with me. He had very distinct long curly hair. He stops and gets off at the 3rd floor to deliver a package, and I continue my trip down. So I exit the elevator on the ground floor, and the door to the building about 20 feet away, and as I walk outside, the same guy with the hair is getting in the UPS truck and driving away. I spent the entire rest of the day trying to think about how he could have done that. There was another elevator, but they moved at the same speed, so even if he dropped off the package immediately and the elevator was waiting for him, I should at least have seen him walking out the door to the building, right? The other possibility is that he took the stairs, but he would have had to sprint down 3 flights of stairs and out the door to beat me, which he would have had to do in like 7 or 8 seconds. Maybe this isn't supernatural, but I still can't explain it. Not long after I returned from a combat deployment, I woke up in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 a.m., to find my then 4-year-old son standing in our bedroom and staring out the window that overlooked our front yard. I sat up and said, "What you doing, bud?" in a very flat voice. He said, "Watching those men, Daddy. They're digging your grave." I got up quickly and looked out the window, where of course there was no one. I hurried him back to his bedroom, and he went immediately back to sleep. He is grown now and has no recollection of it, but it creeped me out that night. Woman with dementia was sundowning at the witching hour pretty hard, flailing around her walker, screeching, causing a ruckus. Got some noise complaints. Very gently, I start the task of heading her back to her room. Halfway down the hall, she goes completely still, turns around, looks past me, and points a shaking, bony finger. "He's right behind you," she whispered. Nope, F that. I essentially carried her to the bathroom in her apartment, did the toileting real fast, helped her back into bed. Night-night. I stayed in a hotel in Sentosa in Singapore, which was called the Barracks Hotel and used to be a British military army officer barracks during World War II. I woke up just as we were nodding off, screaming, "Knife to the throat!" Of course, my partner was terrified. I was having a full-on vision of being executed by bayonet at the hands of a Japanese army officer on my knees next to a dirt road in midday sun. Never before or since had such a vivid vision. I read about the local history of the Japanese invasion of Singapore in World War II, and yeah, that shit really happened. Never staying there again. When I was around 7, my parents would leave all of my toys in the living room. One night, my nan was looking after me because my parents had to go on a business trip somewhere overseas. It was around 9 at night, and my nan was lying in bed watching TV with me when I hear around 10 of them go off at the same time, the sound coming from the basement. When my nan heard them, she went down to see what was up, but there was nothing there. Another time, and this happened recently, my parents asked me to turn the lights off at their shop. So I go to do that, and when the lights do go off, I hear footsteps coming down the stairs from the 2nd floor. I turned the lights back on to see if it was one of my siblings, but nobody was there. When I was in grade 5, my family moved into a new house, and the basement was pretty big, so my brother, cousin, both a year younger, and I decided we should play hide and seek in the dark. So we're playing a couple of rounds, it's all fun. Then it was my turn to do the seeking, so I count out. Then I start to head downstairs. The bathroom door is closed with the light on, so I try and open the door, but it's locked. So I try calling out to them that they're cheating, and I know they're in there because I can hear the sink turning off and on. Then, suddenly I hear laughing in the next room, so I'm kinda creeped out, so I just turn the light on. They're both in the room, no one's in the washroom. I tell them what's up, and we all just bolt upstairs. There also was another time we were playing it and me in my brother's room. We played a couple rounds already and was losing spots to hide, so I just hid under the blanket. When I peek out of our blanket, I see this lady, white and bright see-through dress, and face just standing over the top of me staring at me. So I yell out, "Turn the light on!" Shit my pants. Seen and heard so many things in this house. When I was a kid, I had my own room. I was maybe 8 or 9 at this time. I was sitting alone at the table that was in the room and reading a book. I started to hear a cacophony of voices around me, and they were very distinct voices. They were saying things that I just couldn't make out because they were all talking over each other. They were voices of all different pitches. I got up to put the book I was reading back on my bookshelf, and that's when I felt a breeze passed by me, and one of the little knickknacks on the bookshelf fell off, and at the same time, I heard a very loud voice saying, "Hey you," and they said my name. I bolted out of that room so fast. Shortly after my father died at home, we had a radio in the room that he died in that would turn on at 11:58 every night for 5 years. He didn't die at 11:58, he died in the morning, but we could never get that radio to stop turning on at that time. We unplugged it eventually, moved to the basement, and it stopped after we did that. My cousin and I, who was a year older than I am, were in my grandmother's basement all alone, playing mini golf with my grandfather's golf clubs. My grandmother called us up for a snack. We were 8 and 9 years old. We drank orange juice, fed her parakeets, had some biscuits, and went back into the basement. All of the golf clubs were bent in half, every single one, and the basement was a mess. My grandmother, my cousin, and myself were the only people there. She could have been there in the feeble state, and neither of us left each other's sight. We didn't hear anything, and were probably gone for 20 to 30 minutes. Everyone in the family thought it was ghosts that did it. It's been a mystery. I'm a non-believer, but this is one of about a dozen weird instances in this house. It was built near downtown Salt Lake in the 1920s. My father grew up there after they emigrated from England. Still can't figure it out. Someone must have slipped in and bent them. But who? How? Why? My grandmother passed away 2 years ago after a long fight with cancer, about a month before my wedding. I saw her the day before she passed, but due to work I wasn't at the hospital the day of and was pretty upset. After her funeral, I dreamt I was at my parents' house, but in the dream it was my friend's house. He was saying to me how there are lots of ghosts in the house, and at that point there's a knock at the door. There's a red light window by the door, and I see an outline of a small lady in a purple wool coat, something my grandmother wore before she was admitted to the hospital. I run to the door and open it to see her standing there. I ask her how she is as I unlock the door, and then I wake up. At this point, I'm completely shaken. I get up to get some water and just process what I dreamt. After about 20 minutes, I go back to bed and eventually fall asleep and begin dreaming from the exact point before I woke up, where I unlock the door and see her standing there holding a plate of my favorite food that she would always make whenever I would visit. I hug her and ask her how she is, and she says she's fine and not to be sad because everything is going to be okay. I tell her that I love her and miss her, give her one last hug, and then I wake up. At that point, I feel happy, but when I try to tell my wife what I dreamt, I completely break down and cry, mostly at the fact that even my dream, she brought me a plate of my favorite food. It's hard to explain, but the dream felt extremely real at that point where I saw and spoke to her. Prior to that, when speaking to my friend, it felt like a normal dream. If she did visit me, I'm so glad, and I got one last chance to say goodbye. A friend was a 1/3 owner of a B&B. She said it was haunted. The ghost, I forgot her name, moved decorations and changed people's alarm clocks. I didn't really believe it. The men's bathroom was off the bar. The woman's was around 3 corners and through the restaurant. We'd always been there after hours, so I always used the men's room. One night, we were there for dinner, then went to the bar. I went to the men's bathroom. When I came out, everyone was staring at me. Apparently, the ghost had screamed. I didn't hear it and have always wondered why no one checked on me, if it really happened. Sleep paralysis demons. Imagine dreaming so lucidly that it feels like you were awake. I would dream that I was in my room, but in the dark of my closet was the girl from The Grudge. I couldn't move in my dream, was just frozen in position. Would blink my eyes, my dream, and with every blink, she would come closer. Eventually, she would be on top of me and strangle me. I would try screaming, but no sound would escape. Eventually, I would wake up and spend the night with the lights on, but even then, I would enter the exact same dream, just fully lit. She hated me and really was nourished by the fear and terror I gave off. This isn't really a terrifying ghost story or anything, but interesting nonetheless. I recently visited the Treblinka death camp, and the silence there felt unnatural, like there's no wind, no animal sounds, no noise except the sounds of our tour group made. The silence was quite literally deafening, and many people have corroborated that silence in their visits there. The story goes that after the Holocaust, there was a rabbi that visited the site. One of his followers turns to him and says, "Why is it so completely silent?" I expected to hear the screams and cries of the dead. The rabbi replies to him and says, "Do you think the dead want anything to do with this place? Do you think their spirits would choose rest here?" That is the classic explanation for that horrifying silence, that the spirits of the dead have completely and utterly vacated the site. I was sleeping over at a friend's house when I was in middle school. Giant Victorian historic tour of homes kind of home with lots of ghost stories. Voices woke me up in the middle of the night, and I saw 2 or 3 shadows standing over my sleeping friend. I must have rustled a bit, because the moment they realized I was watching them, they turned toward me, and I screamed like the world was ending. The house was large. His parents didn't hear me, but my friend ran over, said I woke him from a dream about getting murdered, and about 20 years later, he was. A couple years ago, during late fall, I was sitting on my bed reading a book when a slow thud started happening in my mattress right under me. It got stronger and faster, until it sounded and felt like there was a giant heart beating in the middle of it. It started shaking my legs, and it got to the point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. I got up and grabbed my mom from her room, telling her what happened, and asked if she could make sure I wasn't going crazy. She came in and immediately heard it. She put her hand down on my bed and felt the beating as well. We ended up taking apart my bed and mattress, trying to find anything that could do that. It was still beating until we put my mattress back on my bed. Never found a reason why it happened, and it never occurred again. The family that had lived in the house before us lost their dad due to heart problems late fall, then moved out, and the family before them also went through the same thing. We always had a burst of activity in the house during the fall and winter months.